What's going on, y'all? Today I am back to give you my final thoughts and my final review on the Brooks Ghost 17s. So let's get right into it. So as always, we are going to start off with the outsole performance of the Ghost 17s. And as you can see, it looks like a traditional Ghost rubber outsole on the bottom. I don't exactly know what they named this rubber compound on the bottom, but to the touch, it feels a little bit on the softer side. And from a traction point of view, I feel like these performed pretty average. I did run in pretty ideal weather conditions, which it was mostly sunny and I was mostly running on the roads in Los Angeles. But I did notice that when I was running on the roads, when it was a little bit sandy near the beach, I did start to slip a little bit, but it was nothing too crazy as I do slip in most of my road running shoes on those types of conditions. So I'm not gonna really knock it against the Brooks, and it wasn't too bad, honestly. And in all other types of road conditions, while the weather was good, I didn't really have any traction problems. Now, when it comes to durability of this outsole, I only have 25 miles on this pair that I'm holding right now. And I did notice that there actually was some fraying on the bottom of the shoe. That's kind of also how, besides touching the outsole, how I knew that the rubber outsole was on the softer side from a rubber compound perspective. There was a lot of etchings that actually wore off already, and I've only put 25 miles on the shoe. With that being said though, since the outsole is so thick, I still do think that the Ghost 17s will last a decent amount of miles before at least the outsole starts to give out. I just want to note that it is a softer rubber compound and I can already see it fraying or starting to get a little bit messed up just from 25 miles of, I would say, regular usage. So durability overall, I would say is average to maybe slightly below average, but like I said, the rubber outsole is very thick on the Ghost 17. So that's kind of up for speculation, but in my experience, it's been kind of average, maybe a little bit below average since there is a lot of fraying on the bottom. Now moving on to the cushion setup of the Ghost 17s, we have a full length DNA Loft V3, but it's kind of an interesting DNA Loft V3 because it is different than what I've experienced in other Brooks shoes. I have a couple of other DNA Loft V3 Brooks shoes, and these definitely feel like they changed the compound of the midsole. So it's kind of hard to really believe what brands are saying midsoles are nowadays because they do tweak the formula for basically every shoe. An example of that would be New Balance's Fresh Foam X. They literally have a different formulation for every single shoe that has the Fresh Foam X, and I think that that's the same with the Brooks Ghost 17. So this DNA Loft V3, in my experience, is a little bit softer than what I would say the other Brooks models are, and I guess that's kind of a good and a bad thing. In my experience, since the Brooks Ghost has a lower stack height in the forefoot as well as the heel, I did have a lot of ground feel in this shoe, and especially in combination with a softer midsole. When you don't have a lot of stack and you have a softer midsole, it's a lot easier for myself as a heavier runner to compress the forefoot of the shoe and therefore feeling a lot of the rubber outsole on the bottom. So I did get a lot of ground feel in the shoe, but I guess in exchange for that ground feel, you also get a lot of stability. You're not gonna be teetering over any which way because you are feeling a little bit lower to the ground. So it's kind of personal preference. I think for me personally, I had a little bit too much ground feel, and I do think it's because I am a heavier runner. While I was running faster in the shoe, I also did feel like I compressed a lot of the cushion, and there wasn't really much else under my foot other than the rubber outsole that I was feeling. So I would say that impact protection was still decent as it was absorbing a lot of impact, and my body didn't feel too sore after runs, but I would say if I was running anything above a half marathon in this shoe, I would definitely start to feel it. Also, when you're starting to run a little bit faster, than 10K pace, I personally felt the ground a lot under the forefoot, and I think that if you like ground feel, then that's perfectly fine. Or if maybe you're a lighter runner, maybe you won't compress the foam as much and you'll still feel a little bit of cushion in the forefoot. So that's been my experience in the Brooks Ghost. Personally, I think on recovery runs or walks, these shoes have plenty of cushion and you're not going to be really worrying too much about the cushion setup. But like I said, when you're either pushing the pace or you're running long distances in this shoe, that's where I feel like these fall a little bit short unless you like that minimal feel. Now, with that being said, like I said, the structure or the stability in this midsole setup is very, very good, as I would say it's a little bit more minimal. So even though it is a softer midsole, due to that minimal stack as well as just like the minimal feel on foot, you're not gonna really feel too unstable in the shoe because you're gonna feel pretty low to the ground, especially in this day and age of running shoes where all the stack heights are really high. Just to quickly go over the specs as well, in the heel, you have 36 millimeters of stack height dropping to 26 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot, giving it an actual 10 millimeter heel to toe drop, which is way different than all the other Ghosts before it. I believe all the other Ghosts before this one had a 12 millimeter heel to toe drop, so that is new from Brooks. So technically you are getting a little bit more stack height in the forefoot of this model versus the 16, which was last year's model. But in my opinion, since they made the formulation of the DNA Loft Feed 3 a little bit softer, that extra cushion or extra 2 millimeters of cushion that you get in the forefoot, in my opinion, doesn't really do too much. If anything, I felt more ground feel in this model than last year's model because the Ghost 16s had a little bit different of a DNA Loft Feed 3 foam. It was a little bit firmer and in my experience, a little bit more responsive. So when you have a firmer foam, it didn't compress as much for me and I actually felt more ground feel in the 17s than the 16s. So overall, I would say as a heavier runner, I thought that the cushion setup was good for what it was. It's just definitely a more minimal daily trainer for me. And I thought that it was very supportive and very stable, which I really liked. But when it comes to running a higher mileage or, pushing the pace a little bit more, there are other daily trainers that I would prefer over this one when it comes to the cushioning, but it definitely was not a bad setup at all. I just think that for the price point as well, you can definitely get better cushion setups, but that's just my experience. And last but not least, we are going to talk about the upper of the Ghost 17s, which I think is one of the highlights of the shoe. So starting off with the fit, I thought that these ran true to size. I got my normal size 12. I typically wear size 12 in all my running shoes, and I have a slightly wider than average foot. I didn't have any problems with the forefoot. Brooks always does a pretty good job with their sizing. They usually keep it pretty consistent, and I had ample room in the forefoot, but it wasn't too much room, so it was actually pretty nice. And then as for the midfoot lockdown, it was perfect. Heel lockdown was also one of the highlights of the shoe, especially with the runner's loop. This new Achilles pillow also felt really, really good. I felt like I was secured the whole time. So fit, honestly, was one of the best parts of the shoe. I think that it went true to size and I didn't feel unsupported at any time in my run. As for the materials used on this upper, I thought that the upper was a little bit thick or a little bit thicker of a mesh, which isn't a bad thing when it comes to durability, but when it comes to breathability as well as weight, I think that's where the Brooks Ghost is kind of lacking just a touch. I think that there was a little bit of ventilation, but I would want a little bit more, as well as I did feel that this shoe overall felt a little bit heavy, especially for the amount of cushioning that you get in this shoe for a more minimal daily trainer. And it's crazy that nowadays we're considering this shoe minimal, but in my experience, this has been a more minimal daily trainer. I would expect the shoe to feel a little bit lighter. Now, I'm not exactly sure if the weight is due to the outsole, the midsole, or the upper, but in my experience, I would just want maybe a thinner upper to cut weight a little bit, as I do feel like for the types of runs that I would want to use this shoe on, like which is shorter runs, recovery runs, I would want this shoe to be a little bit lighter because it is more minimal in the cushioning department. So in my experience, when I wear a heavier shoe, I just want a little bit more cushion just because I feel like, where's all that weight going, right? But in this shoe, I just felt like for the amount of cushion, it just felt a little bit heavy for my liking. And honestly, I don't exactly know what's the cause of this, but I did feel like this shoe felt a little bit clunky. Like the transitions didn't feel as smooth. It felt a little bit slappy, kind of how like the Nova Blast 5 felt for me personally. It just felt like very flat-footed at times. And I don't exactly know what the cause of that is. I think that it could be the midsole geometry. It could be, maybe the outsole coverage. I don't exactly know what it is, or maybe it's the Achilles heel pillow, which provided a really good fit. But in my experience, just the transitions in this shoe didn't feel the best. And when I did try to pick up the pace, I felt like I was fighting the shoe a little bit, which is actually okay when you're thinking about a regular daily trainer, to really put in the extra effort and the work. But I do think that there are other daily trainers on the market that are priced actually $10 cheaper at the typical $140 price point that do a little bit better in every category depending on what you're trying to use your daily trainers for. So priced at $150, I think that the Brooks Ghost 17 is definitely a solid performer, definitely a good daily trainer, especially if you're looking for a lot of support or maybe you're just starting to run. I think that the Ghost 17 is a great option, but priced at $150, I think it's a little bit tough to recommend this shoe over some of my other favorite daily trainers, which are priced at $10 cheaper at $140. And those would be, the Nike Pegasus 41, which honestly is on sale a lot for under $100 or around $100, which I think is a fantastic value. And then we have, the Saucony Ride 18s, which is one of my favorite daily trainers of this year, priced at $140. I think that the midsole is a little bit more cushioned, as well as it's a little bit more bouncy and fun to run in personally, and the upper is really lightweight and breathable. And then also the A6 Nova Blast 5, which I think is just an all-around really, really good daily trainer. So not to say that this shoe can't compete with those shoes, I just think that for $10 cheaper, you can get maybe a little bit better value with those options. But if you are a big Brooks fan, I think that you will enjoy the Ghost 17. I think they definitely made some changes to this model, which I commend them for, but I did not like that the price increased $10, as well as maybe I don't really prefer that softer DNA Loft V3 foam, because I do feel like the foam compressed a lot in the forefoot and I did feel a lot of ground feel. I didn't feel as protected maybe as previous generations of the Ghost. So that's just my opinion in the shoe. I think that $150 is a little bit tough of a price point because, you know, the Ghost Max 2 and I believe the Ghost Max 3 is releasing, and I'm not sure if the Ghost Max 3 is going to be a little bit more expensive than $150, but the Ghost Max 2 was $150. So I think that's a little bit tough to recommend this shoe, especially with all the other competitors that are currently out on the market right now. But I do think that if you are a big Brooks fan, you will still enjoy the Ghost 17, and it definitely is a solid daily trainer. So that's gonna pretty much wrap up my review on the Brooks Ghost 17. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for future comparison videos and future shoe reviews. Let me know in the comment section down below if there's a comparison that you want to see the Brooks Ghost 17 go up against, either the Ride 18, the Nova Blast 5s, the Pegasus 41s. I'll be happy to do so. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.